Welcome to Reddit Aliens. People who have experienced paranormal activity. What's your story? Posted one day ago. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was younger, maybe like 5, I went to bed and I woke up to the sound of something whispering, and I thought nothing of it until I heard, "Hey, psst." And I looked and saw a black dog with yellow eyes standing on 2 legs. I started screaming and crying and yelled for my parents, and when they came up, the thing hid behind a chair in my room. I was so scared I slept with my parents for a week and never saw that thing again. Used to be a contractor, had to inspect all kinds of places. One was the old psych hospital known as Redacted Asylum that had long been empty. Was working on one of the floors and it was starting to feel off. It was August but got freezing inside. All of a sudden, decided I was going to calmly but briskly leave the building. As I was going down the stairs, I think I was between the 2nd and 3rd floor, something grabbed my ankle. I booked it out of there immediately and didn't care if someone saw me terrified or panicked, ran the F out of there, ripped off my PPE, called my contact to confirm I was out, and left for the day due to outstanding reports. Went home and tried to convince myself it didn't happen. I grew up in a house that originally served as an old folks' home. At night, the whole house would pop and crack. It sounded like people were walking up and down the stairs all night. My mom was always on board that the house was haunted. My dad said it was just a house settling. The house in 1984 was 100 years old. One night, I woke up to the sound of a door slamming. I walked down the hall and peeked around the corner, looking down the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs was a closet. The door was open about 6 to 8 inches, and there was a human face looking at me from inside the closet. I ran into the bathroom and tried to calm down. Finally, I mustered the courage to come out of the bathroom and look down the stairs again. Nothing there. There were many experiences in that house that are harder to explain. I've always slept with my bedroom door open, right? I have a small room, and it feels smaller when the door is closed. Also, I was very scared of the dark as a kid. Anyways, so there was one night I woke up in the middle of the night for no reason, and I had a mirror across my room that faced the hallway. My bed was facing the mirror, so, I could see the hallway from my bed. And that night, I looked in the mirror, and I saw my mom in the mirror, and she was looking down and giving me the creepiest smile. I blinked and she was gone. I'm not sure if that was a sleep-deprived hallucination or what, but it definitely wasn't my mom. Sorry, I'm bad at explaining. I was about 16 and home alone one night at my stepdad's house. Everyone had gone out for the night except me. One thing you need to know about this household, it's in a pretty rural area, in a little village where everyone knows each other and a lot of family lives in the same town. Because of this, no one would ever use the front door. Everyone who came over would just come through the garden and use the back door and walk right in. So it's about 10 p.m. I'm watching TV and the doorbell rings. It startled me a bit. Who could that be at this hour? So I look out the window to get a full view of the front doorstep. No one's there. As I'm looking out, the bell rings again, but there's no one there to ring it. My whole body becomes red hot with adrenaline and fear, and I'm frozen to my seat as it rings again and again. I run to grab my phone to try and call my mom to come home because I'm scared shitless. No answer. The ringing stops. About an hour later, my parents come home and I freak out and tell them what happened, and I'm pissed at them for not answering the phone. My stepdad chuckles and says, "Oh yeah, that's my wife. It happens sometimes." His previous wife and partner for years and years had died a few years back. He said he tried to have the doorbell fixed, only to figure out there's nothing wrong with it. Their theory is that when the doorbell rings, it's her, reminding them she's still with them. Nothing like being just casually told about the ghost ex-wife. Maybe you could have told me when I moved in. The night my daughter was born, it was a home birth. I was laying out a shower curtain and getting the bed ready while she was in the bath. I was a nervous wreck, as this was my first child and the whole home birth thing. Something whispered directly in my ear, "Don't worry, we're all here." The feeling that went through me was like a shot of Dilaudid. In a second wave of love, calm, and joy washed over my body. One of the oddest experiences I've ever had. This isn't much compared to other stories in the thread, but the apartment where I'm currently living seems to have some sort of resident shadow figure. I tend to see it moving in my office. Sometimes when I'm out in the hallway, I'll see a shadow that looks like a medium-build man moving in my office. And sometimes when I'm in the office at my PC, I see it out of the corner of my eye, like someone standing at my shoulder and turn expecting to see my boyfriend, but nobody's there. Or down where the stairs meet the front door. The closet near the front entrance, right by where I've seen the shadows lingering at the end of the stairs, has opened itself a few times when I've been home alone and cooking in the adjacent kitchen. It's never seemed frightening to me though, so whatever it is, some trick of lighting or a bona fide shadow dude, I don't really worry about it much. I did recently have a bad bout of COVID, and there was one night that I was running a temp of 103 and was just absolutely miserable, falling in and out of sleep while being anxious about my rising temp and how labored and difficult my breathing was becoming. I was kind of scared since my aunt had died in her sleep due to COVID relatively early on in the pandemic. She had been on the phone with her boyfriend and mentioned she wasn't feeling well suddenly and was going to take a nap, and I couldn't help but think of her because of how quickly it seemed like things were accelerating that night. At one point, I did manage to fall asleep, but was woken up by a shadow figure opening my door and coming to stand over me. It wasn't my boyfriend. I was staying completely isolated in a different part of the apartment to protect him since he has asthma and is high risk. I asked her later to confirm he hadn't randomly decided to break the quarantine that night and was like, of course not. But I couldn't see anything but a shadowy outline. The figure was saying something to me, but it was unintelligible, but seemed like a question. Then it eventually walked back out of the room. I would have assumed it was a fever hallucination if my cat didn't jump up from her sleeping position to stare at the figure. Who knows? Maybe it still was, and I even hallucinated her reaction. But I kind of like the idea that my shadow roommate came to check on me at my sickest point, when I was anxious about being alone since my boyfriend couldn't. Years ago, when I was just a kid, my mom and I lived in this old apartment in Massachusetts. One day, when I was watching TV while she was cooking, all of a sudden she started to scream, yelling for me to come over and look at this. I ran over. She was standing right by the dining room table, which was empty except for a blue plastic cup at the end of it. I was confused and asked her what the hell was going on. She didn't say anything. She just picked up the blue cup and set it down at the other end of the table. As soon as she put it down, the cup just slid over all the way to the other end of the table by itself. It stopped right at the edge. I jumped back perplexed. My mom picked up the cup and did it again, and again, for a third time. I've always liked technology and science. I grew up to become an engineer. So rather than being scared, I tried to figure out a rational explanation for this. I picked up the cup and looked at it closely. I looked under and around the table. The table was spotless, and there was nothing else there. It wasn't a trick. There were no wires or magnets or anything of the sort. I tried the same thing with other objects and nothing happened. It only happened with this particular blue plastic cup. I eventually tried it while looking directly at the cup, literally 2 inches away from it, and followed its path. The cup would actually vibrate as it moved, and did so in such a way that you could only notice it up close. To this day, I'm not sure what caused the cup to move. That wasn't the only strange thing I experienced in that apartment. Okay, where are my scientists out there? Static electricity, maybe the place leaned a little bit, or ghost? I used to babysit my niece and nephew when they were 4 and 5 while my sister went to work. She lived down the street from me, so I would walk down in the morning before she left and before the kids woke up. I got there one morning, and after she left, I laid down on the couch. I heard one of the kids run down the hall, and I immediately pretended to be asleep so they would go back to bed and not get the day started just yet. I felt my niece run by me on the couch. Her running stomps shook the floor, and I could hear the trinkets on the shelves shake. And I felt the wind of her blow by me. Then it was quiet, but I knew she was still there. She leaned over my ear and moved my hair out of the way and laughed in my ear, and I just thought the audacity of this girl. And then she hid under the end table on the couch. Realizing she wasn't going to go back to bed until I woke up, I just got up and looked under the end table. There was no one there. Completely baffled at how she got up and out of the living room in literally 2 seconds without me hearing shook me. So I went down the hall to her room and was starting to freak out. My nephew was sound asleep in his bedroom, and I got to my niece's room. She was sound asleep tucked under her covers. My heart almost fell out of my body. Used to live in a haunted house growing up. Everybody who had stayed the night has some kind of story. Usually you would see quick flashes of white or black dash across a room or hallway when you turned around real quick. I saw a white cloud travel through my feet when I walked by an empty room. I was in bed and felt something poke me repeatedly while seeing nothing in the room. A childhood friend watched a black figure tiptoe across my kitchen at 2 in the morning during a sleepover. It all stopped after my dad died in the house. Mom says it shook something loose. She described a menacing figure just standing over her bed in the middle of the night. She got the house saged, blessed, and all that. Haven't had an incident since. When we were young teenagers, we were all hanging out at a neighborhood friend's house when he decided it would be fun to pull out a Ouija board. Here we go again. We were all just stupid kids, ridiculously high at the time, so we really had no idea what we were doing with the board. We were sitting around the board in the living room just being dumb, asking silly questions about ghosts, spirits, dead relatives, etc. Suddenly, this guy's dog, who was a big, old, morbidly fat mutt, jumps up, runs into the dining room and starts snarling and barking ferociously at the light fixture hanging above the dining room table. There was nothing there. There was no upstairs in the house. This normally sedentary pig dog is just totally freaking out at a light fixture hanging from the ceiling. He then lets out a spine-tingling yelp, like someone kicked him hard, and he spins around and runs out of the room yelping the whole way through his exit. The group of us just sat there with our mouths hanging open, wondering what the hell we just saw. When reality crept back in, we whipped that board across the room and bolted out of the house like it was on fire. It was honestly like something out of a movie, only this really happened. We all concurred later that this was not something we'd hallucinate due to the excess of bud we'd inhaled earlier. My friend is a part of a paranormal investigation group, and while she was giving a tour around a haunted theater, I hung out in the main theater to talk to a mutual friend. Out of nowhere, I hear a child's laugh clear as day. None of the EMF detectors went off, but I swear it was clearer than most human sounds I've heard. I could pinpoint the exact location in the room it was coming from, but there was no one there, just the wall that the theater shared with a closed, empty store that used to be a morgue. The only people on that floor of the building were myself and a man in his 50s, and the youngest person in the building was too old to have made that sound. But there are stories of a little girl from the 50s or 60s who haunts that room or building because she likes being around people. When I was younger, I used to watch wrestling. I was watching Friday Night SmackDown alone in the living room after the rest of my family left and went to sleep. It was during the time when Undertaker and Shawn Michaels were feuding, 2009. So Shawn Michaels came out dressed in all white and started cutting a promo, and I was waiting for The Undertaker to come out. Suddenly, I felt an intense amount of fear and started shivering. Then I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and saw a shadow person or hooded person walk behind me and disappear. I ran out of the living room and into the bedroom without even turning the TV off. This might not seem like a big deal, but as a kid, I felt really bad because I was wasting electricity by not turning the TV off. I felt like going back to the living room to turn the TV off, but I was too scared, lol. I don't believe in the paranormal, so I guess it was just a hallucination. Still pretty scary though. I was maybe around 7 years old. I was living with my grandma, mother, and sister at the time. Everyone was in the basement talking when I had to pee. Only bathroom was upstairs in the hallway. I decided to just run through the house to hurry up and pee as I was scared of being alone. I can't explain the house layout for it to make sense, but you walked through the kitchen, turned, and walked down the hallway with the living room on your left. There were 2 entrances to the living room, one from the hallway and one from the kitchen. I passed the first entrance when I walked up to the second one. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a long man laying on the floor. I stepped back, looking at the spot. I no longer saw anyone, but before I turned back, I looked up. There was an extremely tall young man dressed in black, bending down and just looking at all my facial features. I ended up running downstairs and telling my mom. Of course, she said it was my imagination. Years later, I discovered it was my grandma's ex-husband that had passed away, looking at me because he passed a few weeks before I was born. I also discovered I can see a few other things and get messages from them, which I got from my mother. My grandma recently had her first encounter, but none of my siblings have ever experienced it. I don't know if I was just tripping because I was tired or what, but last year when I moved out into a place of my own and it was just me at the time, I remember laying down to sleep and getting the chills, which doesn't happen too much in Arizona summer, but I heard the most clearest voice say something and it sounded like someone had leaned into my ear. I shot up and saw no one and forced myself back asleep. It happened one other time a couple of days after, but nothing since. I live on a relatively busy road, and it was spring, so all the windows were open. There's a park and a train track nearby as well. At a certain point, shit just seemed to get louder and louder. The cars, the nearby train horn, the kids playing at the park, and I get the weirdest feeling of just being overwhelmed by the noise. Just when I thought I couldn't handle it, like maybe I needed to close the windows or something, the noise all just stopped. And I heard a tiny whisper say, "Help!" Then the noise started again, but at a normal volume or intensity. I don't know if I stroked out or what, but thinking about it still freaks me the F out. Not my story, but my uncle and his family. When my cousins were born, they bought them toys, and one of them was like a Teddy Ruxpin, but it was a dog. Anyway, one night it kept going off for no reason. Eventually, my uncle got fed up and took its batteries out. Not even a few minutes later, it starts going off again. Unsurprisingly, that thing was in the trash by the next day. Worked in a restaurant that had the story of a patron who had died from choking in the back dining room. Multiple people had reported incidences like phone cords swinging when they were the only one there, sounds of someone coughing or walking around. The waitstaff said the candles in the back dining room would relight between when they were blown out for the night and the final walkthrough. I started out as the dishwasher there. I would constantly hear someone whistling in my ear. One day, we'd been talking about the ghost and some of the happenings. I was standing in the wait station in front of the swinging doors into the kitchen. This door was an old wooden door with the original hinges that were supposed to hold it open when needed. You could get them to work, but you had to push the door open several times and kind of wiggle it just right. It also had a diamond-shaped window to keep you from running into people coming through the other way. I was standing talking to Becky, one of the waitresses, while I was holding an empty dish rack in both hands in front of me. As I turned to go through the door, it swung in toward the kitchen and stayed open. No one was seen through the window, and the door stayed perfectly open. Becky and I turned back to each other with big eyes and just stared, and then turned and stared back at the open door. The only other person there at the time was Mike, the cook. I yelled out, "Mike, where you at?" He calls back, "In the window, why?" I ask, "Did you open the door?" "What are you talking about?" So I told him what happened. He walks over from the window, which was about 5 feet away. He looks at the door and said he had been in the window cutting veggies the whole time. No explanations for it, and never happened again. I'm glad that one other person saw it. The ghostly happenings quit after they completely remodeled and made the back dining area part of the expanded kitchen. Paranormal or not, there is nothing more harrowing than the sound of a child's toy going off in the middle of the night.